Have you heard of Ulmer Satchel? Here in Reichau, you should have. Matilda once spoke about it. Dusk was falling, and from the open windows of the parsonage, between the mallows and begonias, notes of a strange melody drifted in, utterly different from the familiar, tinged with the sadness and wind of Ukrainian dumas and longing Polish songs. Was it the daughter of Johann Nikolaus Kaufmann who sat down at the harpsichord? Or maybe the son of Wilhelm Welser, one of the local pastors? Was it right at the beginning of the Josephine colonization which began in Galcia at the end of the 19th century, after the signing of the imperial patent by Emperor Joseph II? Or perhaps in 1940, when some of the last descendants of German settlers were relocated to the vicinity of Kalisz, and from there in 1945, where their ancestors once came from deep into Germany. Or maybe it was somewhere in the first half of the 20th century, and we remembered the last moments on suitcases and chests just before leaving for Canada. After all, one had to sit down before the road. But let's get back to the Ulmer Satchel. Everything started with it. It started in the city of Ulm. There they boarded hastily, assembled boats — Sattel means box in German — and sailed down the beautiful blue Danube to the east. Those who came to Ulm from Lübeck had a long way behind them and an even longer one ahead. First to Vienna, where if the season was unfavourable or the weather capricious — Galician roads were a challenge for travellers — they waited for further events. Then to Rostolce in 1783, to Burgau, Felsendorf, Freifeld, Lindenau, to Deutsch-Smolin, to Fellbach, to Einsingen, to Ostrowitz, and finally to Reichau, and also to Duisburg in 1785. Not exactly to them, because then these places had completely different names, and no one had heard of Rostolce yet. They weren't even clearly defined. Reichau was a place between Bosnia and Seniavka. Partly it belonged to Bosnia and Seniavka, just as this land partly belonged to the Ukrainians and the Poles. But now when they arrived here, those from Lübeck also belonged to the Germans. But let's go back to the Ulmer Satchel. In Vienna the boats were dismantled. The material was used for other purposes, or as could happen, the best or symbolic part was loaded onto carts to serve as the foundation stone for a house, barn or church or parsonage on site. There are stories that historians have never dreamt of. In any case, none of these boats returned to Ulm. Not yet, not that time, not in that way, upstream. They came from afar. They built and named their settlements in their own way. A new language grew among the languages known here for centuries and slowly began to take root. They say that where the graves of your ancestors are, there is your land. In Reichau on the hill, on the road from Lubachów to Niemiro, a cemetery grew and took root. Houses, barns, gardens and orchards also grew. The sown grain was supposed to yield 100-fold and serve as an example for the local population. Was it so? Undoubtedly, Reichau was a model for itself. Over time, when Johann's daughter married Jan's son, Wilhelm's son married Ivan's daughter, patterns began to intertwine and weave. The ethnic, natural and economic landscape of the area became somewhat complicated. Completely new solutions emerged, not covered yet by any degree or imperial patent, for a time. Have I mentioned Ulmer Satchel yet? Those who boarded boxes in Ulm currently imagined the land they were heading to as the promised land, and the river they were sailing as the river of no return. They were determined, selling everything in Lübeck or another German city or village, they cut off their routes. The last thing connecting them to this land was the waters of the Danube and a wobbly, uncertain boat. They dismantled their Ulmer Satchel to the last plank, leaving no choice. Here, in the new place, they wanted to build new Arks of the Covenant. Was Reichau a good place for such a construction? Maybe. Those we can ask won't answer any more. They lie under the white stone of Brunzow and surprise travellers with the German sound of names and surnames. Those we ask say they don't know any Reichau. What we're asking about is Polessia, and they speak the truth, that the evangelical church built in 1856 is now a church, that the educational cultural centre in Polessia is called the Pastor's House, but it's not a pastor's house, that no one here has played the harpsichord for centuries, that they don't remember that different melody. It's a good thing that Polessia has retained some architectural memory of Reichau, because human memory is too short and selective. The faith of those who sailed here forever, in the belief that one can anchor somewhere and live forever, is buried in simple pine Ulmer chattels, in boats with no return on the cemetery.